Welcome to Game of Attention. I'm your host, Beka Ventham. Today we're talking about smarter strategies for better iteration. And today I've got James and Ryan with me to discuss everything data, AI, and how that impacts the product process to make things a bit faster and a bit better for consumers.
Thanks, Becca. I'm Ryan Smith, based in Vancouver, Canada. In 2014, I launched a company called Footsie. We scanned a lot of feet and shoes to match people to product that fit. We worked with partners like Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, Farfetch, and many brands on Shopify, direct-to-consumer brands selling shoes. And through 2020, I made a transition into Shopify, where I built out the media team. Most recently, I've been working with teams getting into spatial, how to bring their brand to 3D, AR, or heads-up display.
So I'm James, based down in Brighton on the south coast of the UK. So I was part of the founding team at Dragonfly back in 2018 when we started the business. My role is that I look after all of the product and technology side of what we do at Dragonfly. Prior to Dragonfly, I worked at a company called Smart Focus, which is one of the omni-channel marketing clouds. So we worked with big enterprise brands really on everything from kind of single customer view, personalization of content, product recommendation engines in the kind of earlier years of AI applications. I focus quite heavily on personalization and also proximity marketing with indoor positioning. And obviously at Dragonfly now, we focus on creative effectiveness and using AI.
Great. Thank you both so much. If you're listening and you're thinking that with these guys, it's not the podcast for you, I'm with you. They are going to talk in their language and we're going to try and make sure that it's understandable for the rest of us. With that being said, my first question, how has AI transformed the approach to experimentation and iteration within the DTC model in CPG industries?
I guess maybe I can give more of a general answer and then maybe think about how that relates to the D2C side. I think obviously this is a big part of our journey with Dragonfly. AI is transforming the way we experiment and the way we test. We're quite focused on testing content, creative assets and creative effectiveness. So I think in our space, if we look at the traditional methods that came before, a big reliance on panel-based testing, eye tracking, which are all really powerful ways to gather data. I think where that may be limited, the kinds of customers we work with is, it can take quite a long time to gather that data, to sort of pull it together, get the insight. It's quite difficult to iterate quickly because of that, and it's quite time-consuming and costly. So I think what AI is starting to do is augment traditional methods, to really help accelerate testing and help customers and businesses test more content faster. It's not always a case where AI is going to be a silver bullet and have all the answers, but I think its ability to augment traditional methods and increase velocity alongside those traditional methods is a big trend that we see. In terms of D2C, I think especially during the pandemic, you saw a big shift towards D2C, and we work with quite big CPG clients, and I think suddenly the need to produce a lot of content across a lot of different markets, puts a lot of pressure on teams internally. So I think again, just bringing new modern methods to the creative process in a new channel has been something that we've seen gain a lot of traction recently. So I guess that's kind of a starter for 10, but interested to hear your thoughts, Ryan, as well.
Something you said that reminded me of the manufacturing teams that we worked with, where you're getting a multiplier. Many people are focused on the end of funnel cost of acquisition and their Facebook ads, but when they're adjusting to AI methods or building all their content in 3D, they're actually able to use that content in manufacturing, in prototyping, for design reviews, all the way through having a universal source of truth for all their media. And then they can render out scenes, lifestyle imagery, banner images, videos, etc. So there's quite a significant multiplier effect by having new tooling up and down the digital supply chain. And so it starts with that return on investment. I want to be able to convert my sales as efficiently as possible, especially with e-commerce. But slowly over time, teams start to see I'm doing something once that I could be getting 5 times or 10 times multiplier up and down my company, particularly in the D2C use case.
Yeah, I think there's a real compound effect of those short, quick testing iteration cycles. The rapidly you can test, the more you can compound the learnings and build on that. I guess another example, maybe outside of the creative domain, which is obviously where we're focused, is maybe, I recently joined an SMR talk, which is kind of quite focused on that market research end of things. Like we're quite focused on the creative execution side, testing creative executions, the relative performance of different design variations. But if we look at market research, AI is also transforming the way we think about, testing, populations, demographics. We've got the rise of ideas like synthetic participants and trying to scale, representative information about audiences and what's going to fit. And again, I think it's this same thing where it's not a silver bullet, but it's quite interesting to see the dynamic of what AI is bringing to the table and how that's maybe sitting alongside, methods that are tried and tested and, over many years that teams rely on.
At Shopify, I had the privilege of having user experience researchers and data scientists wrapped around the product team. A pretty sophisticated team working on the Shopify platform to enable millions of merchants to sell everything under the sun around the world. In doing that work, we used a number of tools like Dovetail to set up interviews, talk to people using Shopify, understand their issues, and then in aggregate, being able to see patterns across multiple people over time. And like many AI tools, it doesn't forget. And so every time you add something, you just keep accumulating knowledge. So while I forget what I did last week, or another colleague might come in who's new, they log into Dovetail, and sure enough, all those insights, sentiments, little sentences that grab the heart of the customer, what really thrilled them, or like really significant pain points, that can then be mapped over to what should we do differently? What should we do differently in our business tomorrow? So when we slowly over time accumulate that data set, hours and hours and hours of recordings, people who've tagged things in the recordings, and then the additional analytics that can come from those tags, we're getting a significant multiplier for every team to make better decisions. Deep empathy with customers, I think, is also something that might not be discussed enough when it comes to approaches to experimentation and iteration. It's often quite an analytical process. I have a hypothesis. I want to see what's going on with my customers. I want to understand how to better run my direct-to-consumer model for efficiencies. How do I get better, conversion rates for the dollars I'm spending? It's quite a, economics mindset. However, I've been finding with that complexity, once you get tighter into the user story and you have one person who's representative, you then start to see how resonant is that emotional experience across multiple people's user journey. And that, for many people deep in the data, start to cultivate more empathy. For Beka, as she's going along shopping, is she getting what she wants, or is she frustrated? Why is she frustrated? Is it too hard to check out? Is it too hard to get the variant? These emotional moments in the journey are emerging from the AI tools that used to be only accessible to very sophisticated enterprise tools.
Actually, it's a really interesting point. You reminded me of something I watched not so long ago. I think Jeff Bezos was talking about, internally, often, teams rightly are very data driven. We're trying to bring data into the conversation, objectivity. And it was really interesting. He said, sometimes you have a situation where you have an anecdote from some customer feedback, or you have maybe feedback that's been sent to him. And he talked about sometimes you have a conflict where the anecdote doesn't match the data. And he said what he's learned over the years is that his gut feeling is actually you should trust the anecdote, and you should relook at the data. And I think what was interesting about that is I think the approach of data-driven decision making and objectivity is absolutely the right thing to pursue. But it's a really good example of, you also don't want to get lost in the numbers and detached from the customer in that kind of in that empathy sense that you described. Like, if you've got anecdotes coming in and stories and real world examples that you then look to pair with what the data's telling you, that there's still a really important role for both of those things. It just reminded me of that. The other thing, just coming back to what you talked about previously, I think just talking about how AI can help in general with problems of scale is really key. We talked about technology helping to improve processes and speeding up testing and bringing new methods for that. But actually, some problems are really almost impossible to tackle without technology and AI. Like if we think about the creative domain, creative effectiveness, it's very difficult for brands to say monitor creative effectiveness at scale globally across their business with all these different channels, all these different markets that they're producing content for. And I think AI and technology is ultimately very, very good at synthesizing insight and trend and the so what from that large amount of data, and it's very difficult for humans to do that without support from technology and AI. So I think that scale, almost observability challenge, at least within the creative domain, is quite an interesting field, I think, for where AI is helping.
Ryan, you made some very good points there about the human and the fact that obviously for such a long time the human wasn't a priority, and now it feels like it's coming back to prioritizing their needs. And yes, we're still excited about the technology, we're still excited about what can be done, but we're focusing on the end user. And I think there was a period then where everyone was tech focused, and there was we forgot about the emotion at the end of it. Which brings me to this question, which I'd like to ask you, Ryan, is how do you utilize consumer feedback and data simultaneously to drive these cycles of product development and marketing strategies?
10 years ago, I took a very different approach. 5 years ago, I was adjusting. In the last 12 months, it's adjusted again. So let me go back 10 years first. I had far more of an MBA mindset. I was looking at the tools. I was seeing what was coming out in a dashboard, running data-driven experiments and making more data-driven decisions and thinking that, damn, am I ever smart? Using Tableau or BI from Microsoft. And it felt like having a superpower by having ability to crush through so much data so quickly. 5 years ago, I was more deep into AI tooling. We had built a model to understand people and biometrics. And when we took that model to people who had done their PhDs in that area, they were like white in the face, horrified at what we had done in 18 months that had taken them 5 years of graduate school. And so we had mathematically come to similar understanding of biometrics and human body shape and fit preferences. So that was really interesting. And like early stages of AI, absolutely outcompeting and hustling humans. I think there's a shift in the last 12 months where we are now highly confident that most of the time the AI can outpredict us. It's going to hallucinate sometimes, but it keeps improving. And so that's beginning to be pretty consistent and true. Maybe 80% of the time or 90% of the time it's right. Sometimes it's really funny, but it's sure improving fast. And now it's shifting our role as the manager of the AI agents to have better judgment. And I sure find for my friends and colleagues, their attention to bias, confirmation bias, recency bias, other forms of bias that shape the decisions, the why, are getting more and more sophisticated. So we as humans, seeing these AI agents out hustle us, have to figure out an alternate way to compete. We can't just rely on Tableau or BI. We can do things mathematically that kind of hustle a PhD. So now how do we compete and utilize consumer feedback to drive these cycles? And I think it's our ability to understand bias and what questions we're asking is improving our judgment. The judgment matched to the prediction ability of AI is where we really get the superpower.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think there's something in the idea that it almost brings the human role back to the creativity side of deciding what problems to solve, what things to go after. You've got this incredibly powerful AI capability that can help you get there and help you get there faster. But I think it almost becomes a problem of choice. What problems are you going to chase? What are you going to focus on, and why? Ultimately that needs to be informed by that deep understanding of the customer. What to inform what problems you think are important. But then you've got this very powerful machine that can really do a lot for you, both in terms of synthesizing complex information and, helping you synthesize ideas quickly. I think we do a lot of prototyping internally where actually large language models are really good at helping you distill your own thinking and organize your own thoughts. And, but it's still for us at this stage, we're really kind of the driver in deciding what things are we trying to solve, what problems are we trying to tackle. And then it's understanding how the right tools can be used alongside one another to help you go down that path.
When you see the recent OpenAI release, they have that additional emotion on the voice model. So you want the model to speak robotic, it will. If you want it to speak, very emotionally and like high cadence up and down, really, really pumped about something, it will. And so that's just an extra layer on top of the voice model, and that can make us as humans feel a lot more comfortable. The questions we're asking, we have to be more refined. You go to ChatGPT, you get something that's like verbally reasoned really well, but it comes across quite flat. You read that text and it looks like it was produced by a computer. It's like statistically accurate and good bullet points and good formatting and kind of incredible that it cranked it out in seconds, but not human. And so the judgment and the way we're relating to one another and the way we want our customers to experience our brand requires us to be that much better and more empathetic humans so that we can use these tools to then deliver on the promise of our product.
Yeah, and actually I think the point you kind of touched on briefly there around, it's quite generic in terms of the kind of output. It's statistically the right response in the same way, consistently. And, I guess, again, that creativity point I made, it comes down to, as a brand or any business, injecting your DNA, what's unique about you, how do you want to come across? And I guess, obviously that's possible, that's what building custom GPTs is all about, providing your own context of how you want to sound and then leveraging that knowledge that you're putting in to the model to then help you create that output. But it feels like a kind of a similar challenge again. It's the creative problem of how you want to deploy that power.
I'm seeing some incredible work come out of Teresa Torres and others. There's been decades of work around user journeys, buyer journeys, map out your stakeholders. And I think people can end up getting a little too caught up in the tool and then needing to like anchor somewhere. And so re-anchoring on the user journey is like really critical right now, 2024, all these AI tools. Really, what are we trying to do for a given person? And then maybe if there are multiple people, great. Or let's just like map it out a little bit more clearly. And then something I've been adding more to my practice is more assumption testing. I've actually got far more assumptions embedded in those user journeys than I care to admit. Blocking off a half a day every week, revisiting the user journey. How are they buying? What's our brand and how are we trying to express our brand and our unique voice to these people? And is it actually resonating? And can I list, like itemize the assumptions on my website, in my email communication? Do I have assumptions here? Yes. Can I actually label them? No. Can I get a couple people in to give me real feedback and like go through it? Yes. And I was just reading this post from another colleague here who runs a business intelligence company about how inside of companies, employees and colleagues will have narratives. And in a healthy culture, those narratives are supporting the decision making. In an unhealthy culture, people start to have a lot of very self-serving narratives. And so by the time it rolls up to the CEO or other decision makers, they're getting like very noisy data. And when you go back into your tickets and customer support requests and phone customers to like ask them, hey, I saw that you wrote X and Y, tell me more. So what happened when you got that weird response from us? And like just get really accurate data. We do that incredibly well. It's like, I don't know if any AI can pull off that job. User journey, assumption tests, call the customer, unpack it more, and deeply listen with positive intent to help them. And that's sort of where like we have consciousness, self-awareness, care about each other and our relationships with one another. That's like a beautiful result of many years of survival, right? Evolution has caused us to care a lot about what other people think. The tribe, over the next hill, if we're all cool, we all get to survive. If suddenly things break out and we go to war, we might not survive. So we get this out of our human evolution, but AI doesn't. And so user journey, assumption testing, listening to each other deeply is actually quite a superpower. And I think it's going to continue to have many days in the sun.
I think all of that, I feel like, cascades up into just being passionate about a problem that you're trying to solve. I think if you're passionate about the customer experience and you have an opinionated feeling about what it is you're setting out to do today or this week, or what the vision and mission is for your brand or your business, I feel like that, ultimately it's back to that. You need an opinion about what it is you're going after, and then it's how do you bring technology together to help you do that. So your point, it always comes back to that customer thread. If you put the customer at the center, you understand what you're setting out to achieve, and then, to your point, trying to systematically remove your biases, by building that into your process that you follow around you. I guess you end up with the best of both. But it is just about this idea of a co-pilot. Everyone talks about it, so it's such a kind of almost over discussed thing, maybe in some ways, but it is the perfect analogy for me, because I guess it is exactly that. You are the pilot, you're deciding where you want to fly, what problems you want to solve, and at the moment that does feel like what the AI's role is at the moment, is assisting you as a co-pilot and helping you get there.
I'm in content, and I was a bit later to come on to kind of chat GPT and whatever. Like, I played with it, but I've only really fully integrated it into my processes in the last 6 months, because this not knowing whether it would be able to do what I needed it to do from a more kind of emotional standpoint, because I'm very much about adding value, and what you're both saying about finding that sort of sweet spot in between to make sure that you are customer focused, you're not leaning too much on the tool, but you're also not neglecting the efficiency that it can offer. I feel like I've only really found that in the last 6 months.
Everyone's got to find their kind of equilibrium in the
Yeah.
relationship that they have, right, with these tools. I find it quite interesting, something that occupies my thoughts around this, especially in relation to Dragonfly and what we're doing. At the moment, at least, I very much see these kind of large language models as creating an incredibly effective one-to-one experience. And what I mean by that is you can go on this journey of conversation and dialogue with the model. You can use it as a sounding board, but it's kind of a singular flow that you're going through, and it's incredibly powerful how you can use it along the way as you're thinking about things or exploring ideas. We talk about, where is AI going to take over? That scale problem that we talked about earlier, at the moment, in some senses, the large language models are not a good fit for that, because they're not about connecting into all the channels of your distribution globally and pulling data in and proactively giving you insight. They're kind of this chamber where you can go down a path of kind of bouncing ideas around and exploring something. Obviously you can take data from one system, you can put it into the language models and have it, especially now with the latest release, have it kind of be multimodal and combine different things. But I guess I think about what is in the future the role of the LLM experience in the assistant versus other forms of AI that are going to have to sit alongside that. How broad is the LLM remit going to be in 2 years' time? Is everything going to get done within that ecosystem, or is this actually going to kind of hit a ceiling of what that one-to-one experience offers, and then there are going to need to be other things and other experiences that perform other kinds of tasks or other functions for you?
6 months in and feeling more confident, Beka, you're in like the top percentile of humans. If you're questioning like the nature of humanity, James, like, you're on it. Like, we really have to like recalibrate our roles with these new tools. I think globally we're 14 months into really understanding LLMs. No one was talking about them in 2022. Some further background: I have a physics degree. I was quite deep into 3D modeling. I was at Stanford in 2001 working on their particle physics simulator. A particle physics simulator is a statistics engine. It has a basic understanding of silicon and pipes, tubes, and what all those objects look like in a big detector. And then you throw electrons at it near the speed of light and see what happens. You run a lot of simulations because when you go and build a detector, it costs you $5 to $10 billion. People have been running these like big statistical experiments for a long time and not really knowing how they're going to play out. Every once in a while, something happens, like the Higgs boson, like the particle that we think is responsible for matter has some data attached to it, because we actually ran an experiment that was being simulated for like 15 years. And so we're in this big simulation. We have these AI tools. We're all trying to figure out what they mean to me as a content strategist, as a CEO of a company, as a founder of a direct-to-consumer brand. And then we just need to be a little patient with ourselves, and it could take a few years of iterations, and then ingesting what does work and rejecting what doesn't.
It's a little tangent here, Beka. So you can pull me back in a minute. But if you forgive me in advance. I wondered, Ryan, if you'd read about there was a bit of a breakthrough in fusion, nuclear fusion, and that they were applying AI to try and stabilize. I think it was stabilizing the plasma. It's almost as if they've spent decades trying to solve that problem by finding the solution, like what is the solution, and all these experiments working towards that. And actually what AI's offered in that space is actually, it almost felt when I read it like, instead of just finding the solution, just use AI to kind of almost manage it and just almost manage the symptom almost, rather than find this novel way, I guess, of solving it perfectly.
This is happening both in fusion, which has been a 50, 70-year problem that humans have been trying to solve, and in quantum computers. The same thing's happening right now, particularly around material science, where we have a limited but fair understanding of Newtonian physics and quantum physics. And then when you start to run the experiment and have the AI goal seek, here's the outcome I expect. Now just run a ton of iterations and change the variables. And what would you do to achieve that desired outcome? We are running the same thing in marketing and e-commerce and 3D these days. Here's a desired outcome. You play with the parameters. Like, how would you optimize for that goal? There's a fusion team nearby me here, and that was one of the issues that they had identified 10 years ago, was if we had a time device and we could go forward about 100 years to see how people solve this problem, then today we could design the devices to get the waves so that they focus the beam to get the fusion to work at the temperature we desire, and then to get that 10 times energy out for one energy in. And we're actually getting more of those types of problems solved with AI.
It's such a fascinating area. I mean, I could talk for an hour about the science side, because I love it from not as an expert, but just as a kind of interested observer, really, not in the field. But I guess the main takeaway here, I suppose, is the goal-seeking nature of how AI can help to solve problems. And if we look at the marketing, e-commerce, the advertising, just the whole marketing ecosystem, it is ultimately about trying to more deeply understand what works, what connects with the audience, where that next breakthrough might be. And I suppose it's full circle back to, as the pilot, you have to choose the right problem to go after, and then it's how AI as a goal-seeking method can help you get to that goal. And for us with Dragonfly, it's about what creative characteristics perform best for you in the wild. So it's using that data at scale and using AI to try and understand that and spot patterns that might otherwise be too difficult to spot.
The AI doesn't care. It's beautiful. It doesn't care at all. Sometimes tries to impress you, but mostly is emotionless. And so take advantage of that. Right? It's a car that will go forward when you press the throttle. Don't anthropomorphize it. It's not her. It's just calculating what you want to achieve. And so our job in part is to use these tools enough to understand where they fail and where they're advantageous, and then apply them effectively. They're the co-pilot, we're the pilot. NVIDIA has a pretty similar approach with AI agents. And so some engineers are going to shift into becoming AI agent managers.
Yeah, it's very interesting for us. Obviously we're in the product development space, and there's huge advantages to leveraging these technologies in writing good code. And but I think, again, we're very aware of that risk of the quality of the output, the fact that you still need that kind of quality oversight, and even just from a building products, you also care about long-term maintainability of those products. It's not just about shipping features and solutions to problems that you can see in front of you. It's creating a product that lasts, that you can maintain, that new people that might come and join your team can look after and understand. So, that there's more to it than just finding the shortest path to solving that one thing. It's things like documentation, commenting around it, well-structured code, and maintainability. So, there's plenty of room, probably everywhere you look, for the human and the pilot to be wrapped around this powerful technology. I guess I'm sure that's true everywhere.
Predictive machines. It's a great read for anyone leading a business these days to understand the economics. So it's a business read, but it does expose a number of the principles around thinking about prediction and thinking about judgment.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've read Freakonomics, but I really enjoyed reading that many years ago now. But I mean, there was one interesting story in there that stuck out for me, which was I forget the details, but I think it was a kindergarten where they had a problem with parents picking up the kids late, and they decided that they were going to introduce a fee to try and solve this problem. And what they did was they substituted a social obligation to not be late with a financial cost. So what happened was suddenly everyone was really comfortable being late, because now they could just in their mind say, well, there's just a cost to that and I'm happy to pay it. So they had a massive increase in that problem afterwards. And I guess these are interesting things where I still find it quite hard to imagine that even these amazing AI models are going to be able to kind of capture some of these nuances and interesting outcomes. Yes, you can predict things at scale in a more trending sense, I suppose, but you've always got this interesting kind of surprise that can happen with real people in the real world. And I guess that's why ultimately you still need this right healthy mix of, AI-driven testing, experimentation, data-driven approaches with a strong human component of speaking to people and the softer side.
It's not going to know. I really don't think it's going to have the sense or wherewithal or consideration of like what to do or what should I avoid, or is this the right way to go about things? Doesn't care.
I still say please and thank you to it.
Yeah.
I must admit, I still talk to it as if it's a real person. I still struggle to be really kind of rudely direct.
Yeah.
It's your car. Like if you talk to your car and you give your car a name, cool. Like that's like nice and friendly of you. But when you talk to Google Assistant or Siri or like whatever other agent, like it's a device.
Yeah.
And if see, the thing I think about this is as you start to like go too far into personalizing it, is you also attribute its intelligence, and I don't actually think it's intelligent. It's computing. Right. A human coded something, and now we're able to interface with that thing, and it is parameterized, and it might be a 70 billion parameter model, which is incredible, and it might run in like sub-second, and it might have a voice, but it's all compute. There's no true intelligence there. It's codified intelligence. Yeah.
But because it's kind of happened during it's a weird thing to adapt to and then suddenly speak to. Like I know it's a thing, and yet because it's responding to me, I want to be polite. Like
it's going to be even harder now with the kind of emotional voice as well, and the persona that they put on it.
So with my daughter, when the vacuum runs around, she gets scared, and I'm like, "Should we turn it off?" And she goes, "Yes." And I turn it off, and I go, "It's a light bulb. Like let's turn the switches on and off, and then I'm going to turn like the robot on and off." So I want her to really understand it's an on and off switch.
So Ryan, for you, I'd love to know whether you can discuss or think of any specific examples where iterative testing led to unexpected results or breakthroughs, specifically in CPG, if you've got any, but otherwise any, and what were the kind of big surprises and how you navigated them?
Going back to FTSE, we were quite early to running a full AI stack. It was 2014 when we started. 2 years prior, the seminal paper came out, AlexNet. And so we were trying to figure out how people would interact with the AI, like on this thread that we've been pulling on. And they had a really hard time. There wasn't really a mental model for interacting with an AI like there is now. After they saw the initial results, and this happens as people use ChatGPT for the first time, then they go, wow, now I have a model and I can like repeat this model and like dig on it. So getting that over that initial hump of using the AI tool as a user, as a business is like quite significant. So the initial activation energy, like that first time user journey, is brutal with AI. And then people take it as their own and they start to act like rabid fans to show everyone else. And so there's a beautiful thing that happens. And I see this, seen this with shopping. We've seen this in other use cases where your fan base is extraordinary. So then you really double down on like referral programs, free trials, from referrals. You just double down on that energy and not do the like paid acquisition. All the organic acquisition has extra energy. So I see many teams taking advantage of that with AI applications now. We enabled custom fits, which was not accessible to many people. If you were used to buying $1,000 or $5,000 shoes, you would get your shoes made. For people that had never bought a custom pair of shoes before, that was quite foreign. That you would make it for me, and it would be at a reasonable price, like $200 to $500. Most of the people that had done something like that they were diabetic or they had some prescription from their orthopedist, and they waited 8 to 12 weeks to get their shoes. And so we had changed that whole user journey. In a number of cases in medical applications, doctors paired with AI are getting major advantages right now, massively reducing errors, reducing misdiagnoses, seeing other potential issues that otherwise they could have missed. And equally, if it was only the AI would have missed from the human, the doctor's experience. Another case that we're starting to see is the Apple Vision Pro. Not quite a consumer device. I'd really call it a developer kit. But I'm noticing in calls, due to the eye tracking and the hand tracking, without the monitor in between me and the person I'm talking to, we're having better conversations. It feels more like we're in the same room. There's a little bit less of the delay. Like on a video call, you kind of wait till you see the other person's lips stop moving or you hear the end of a conversation. Whereas in person, you naturally overlap each other a little bit more. And you can follow the lead of the body language to get into the conversation more deeply. And because of hand tracking and eye tracking, and you can look people right in the eye, the conversations are better. And so, as an example of where AI is leading to some breakthrough, many consumer applications are now unlocking something that we're pairing in a unique way. And then through AI sitting on a headset and talking to people, I think it's going to be quite disruptive as the device becomes more accessible to people to take advantage of that technology. At Shopify, we ran a number of media experiments. We used imagery as a baseline. So if you had interacted with images on a website, that was 0. If you interacted with video on a website, we saw a 60% increase in the conversion rate. Kind of no surprise there when you interact with a brand that's got some great landing page video and maybe a product with like a flyover or something. It really enhances the whole customer journey and the conversion rate's higher. When we started to see the 3D and augmented reality data come through, it had an average of a 94% conversion rate lift. And so then you start to like unpeel why and what's the causation to those different user journeys. One of the things that really popped up for me was dwell time. So if I'm scrolling down a page with text and images, it's not sticky and I'm scanning. As soon as I'm watching a video, the video is curating a certain view and a story, and it's causing me to like inspect and engage the story more deeply. As soon as I have a 3D model, which I can inspect from all angles, or I can put into my living room, it's really extending the dwell time, and that is correlated to trust. As soon as the trust really cranks up, of course, the conversion rate is going to convert more highly. this is all observable, and the AI can really take advantage of this in terms of specific examples where iterative testing has like emerged to extraordinary results in the D2C space.
Interesting. And I guess it's the point you made earlier of really the AI doesn't care what the actual answer is, but just following what really matters. It might sometimes surprise you, or it might not be what you expect. We see similar stories when we look at large scale data sets around creative, and we're looking to kind of help customers understand what characteristics in content have correlated with outcomes. And again, it's always very interesting to look at how quite kind of low level characteristics of imagery and video can actually have quite a big influence on how our brains react. So it's always a really enjoyable process each time we look at a new data set, because you can find trends that are fairly consistent, across the board when it comes to certain use cases, which seem to be kind of fairly underlying truths. But equally, then every brand has a unique set of guidelines, a unique story, a unique way of positioning, and sometimes, it might be a different set of characteristics that actually drive the most success for them. So I find that a really a very interesting and rich kind of area to explore.
Thank you both, and also thank you both for keeping it kind of not too. When we started getting into quantum physics, I was like,
yeah, sorry about that. I couldn't help myself.
But thank you both for your time and your insights, and I know our audience will find it really valuable.